Hello, everyone, and welcome to the launch event for the Tonic Fabricate Data Agent, our groundbreaking AI agent that makes generating complex, hyper-realistic synthetic data as easy as asking for it. My name is Chiara Colombi. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Tonic.ai, and as always, I am so happy to be joined by my colleague, Mark Mercado, Tonic.ai's Head of Engineering for Fabricate. To say hello.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to meet you. If this is the first time, nice to see you. And if you've seen me before, well, welcome back.
Yeah, actually, many of you already know Mark probably from the ever popular Makaru.com, his first synthetic data platform. While building out Makaru, Mark also held engineering leadership roles at several dev tool-focused companies over the past decade plus. More recently, he and a fellow developer created Fabricate, and they, along with Fabricate, joined the Tonic AI team this past spring. In fact, it was just a few months back that Mark and I were right here on a webinar launching Tonic Fabricate's initial release. And as with all things in the AI space, the velocity with which Fabricate has expanded its capabilities is incredible. So today we're here to showcase Fabricate's new accelerated approach to data synthesis that is now available to all of our users. Before we get started, if you have any questions along the way, please do feel free to submit them at any time via the Q&A feature on Zoom. You should find that option in the nav bar along the bottom of your Zoom window. We'll aim to get your questions answered as they come up. We're happy to, jump in at any time. We also welcome your comments and your ideas because we're confident that this demo will get your gears turning. Ever since Mark first demoed the Fabricate Data Agent to our team internally, we here at Tonic have been riding this wave of almost unhinged excitement to get it out into the world. In a way, the data agent is what some of our customers have been asking us for years. A synthetic data solution that understands what you want without you having to configure all the details. A solution that can figure out the details for you. All you have to say is, here's my schema Fabricate, have at it. And the workflow is that simple. I've got a slide to prove it, if I can just share. Cool. Uh, yeah, you start by providing a schema or simply describing your ideal data set as a natural language prompt in the chat UI. Fabricate might then ask you some clarifying questions, which you can choose to answer, or you can just leave the decisions up to Fabricate. I do that all the time. The data agent will then get to work creating tables and filling them with relational data on the fly. You can then review that data and you can iterate with the agent on it, requesting tweaks as needed to really meet the data that you're looking to create. For example, you might say, make this entire data set that you've already created for me specific to a company based in France, and it'll update all the values. Or maybe generate some doctor's notes based on the patient visit table that it generated for you. Once you're happy with your data, you can export it to a variety of formats, from CSV and SQL to JSON to PDFs, docx, and more. Which leads me to my next slide. Fabricate isn't just for generating structured data sets. It can also generate semi-structured data and context-rich, unstructured data that can be generated within your structured or semi-structured data or from that data, enabling you to create downloadable documents based on the data you've generated in Fabricate. And we're going to cover examples of all of this in the demo in just a bit. But before we do, you might be asking yourself, why can't I just build this myself with an LLM? And here's the thing. This isn't just a pretty UI wrapped around an LLM. This is years of our developers' experience tackling the gnarliest of data synthesis challenges baked into Fabricate on the back end. And it's hundreds of hours of customer calls digging deep into what our customers need from their data and how best to deliver that on the front end. Fabricate has all this synthetic data experience and know-how built into it, along with its industry-leading data generators, features like role-based access control, customer support, the ability to export data to Oracle, SQL Server, Databricks, and more. The end result, a platform for synthetic data generation that is fully equipped to drive new product development, AI model training, sales demos, customer onboarding, and use cases that we probably haven't even realized yet. If you've got a use case that I haven't mentioned, we'd love to hear about it in the chat. We are always curious to hear what you're creating with Fabricate. And we're excited to see Fabricate help you realize the value of synthetic data by unblocking data access so you can build better quality products and get those products to market faster, all while guaranteeing data privacy compliance. All right, I believe the stage has now been set, so I will stop my share and pass things over to Mark and to the star of the show, the Fabricate Data Agent.
All right. Thank you very much, Kiara. I'm going to show off Fabricate in all of its new glory. Think about Fabricate as really a AI-driven studio for generating realistic data, like for any scenario, or a vibe coding tool for data. So the most common way that people use Fabricate is like they already have a schema in mind. Sometimes, often it's like a relational schema. Sometimes it's um, like the schema that would be like data going into an API. And sometimes it's JSON schemas, XML schemas. I would say the most popular use cases are like I want to create a mock database that matches what my product expects, or I want to load data into a new environment through the API of my product. So generally, we're either getting relational database schemas or like API contracts. And I'll show you a bit of both, but I'll start with relational. So let's say that we have like a Postgres schema like this for an e-commerce store. So this is like customers, the products they buy, orders and the line items in the orders, um, payment methods like saved credit cards, and then the actual payments that correspond back to the orders. So there's like foreign keys in here. There's some enum types, but there's no data. This is just the schema that you might use to stand up a new environment. So generally, the way to get started is to just take that schema and drop it into the data agent here and just say, generate data for this. So Fabricate's going to analyze that schema, and it's trained to ask you questions when it's not sure the like type of distribution that you want, like when were the records created, where are your customers, all that kind of stuff. So we can answer as much of that or as little of that as we want. I'll say like I want 1,000 customers, like 20 products, let's say like electronics. Um, and I want like 1 to 5 items per order, 1 to 5 orders per customer, all customers in the US. And then like everything else is up to you. So it'll come up with a plan for generating that data, and then it'll start laying out the data model and writing code to actually generate the data. So first it's going to create all the tables based on our DDL.
I'll check
And
a quick
yeah,
question
go ahead, Kara.
about what you could start from. The question is, can Fabricate take data structure input from something like Elation or a similar data governance tool?
I'm not familiar with that particular tool, but it's all AI based. So it's not like we need to train it on specific schemas or we're looking to parse any specific format. If the AI has any built-in training on it at all, it should be able to handle it. And so you can do some pretty crazy things. Like you can even upload like a screen capture of a form and say like, give me data for this form. So pretty much any like structured or semi-structured schema definition, whether it's docs or an API contract or just a text file and markdown, it can handle all that. And it'll ask questions where it's unsure, but most of the time it can just sort of like take the ball and run with it. So I would say broadly yes for sort of any input format.
Very cool.
Okay, so while all that was going on, it first wrote some SQL to just generate the tables. So that's largely based on the DDL that we uploaded. And you can see what it's doing as it's going along. And then the real meat of the data generation is using JavaScript. So the data agent basically has internal storage. It's got a bunch of training, and it's got a secure sandbox where it can write and run JavaScript to generate data based on your schema and all of the questions that you answered and everything that you tell it. So it's not configuring like a bunch of rules or like a config to generate data. It's literally writing bespoke code using the tools that we give it. And so there's sort of no limit to the fidelity or the nuance or the characteristics that can emerge in that data. It's literally anything you tell it, it can model. And that includes like some of the basic things like relational integrity between tables. You'll see here we have a bunch of foreign keys and primary keys, and they all relate back, 100%. But it includes like softer sort of correlations where, all the payment for a particular order should match the sum of the prices of the items in that order. Like it'll just figure that stuff out automatically. So you can have sort of like longitudinal integrity. Data can make sense over time. It can make sense across tables. You can have functional dependencies between columns. A lot of that it just figures out automatically. Like for instance, relationship between names and genders. Like it'll just figure those things out automatically. Some things are less obvious, and it may ask you, or you may have to tell it. But it can have all that sort of like relationships between data. It's not just a random generator of values in columns that are all disconnected. They're all quite connected. And you'll see things like, ages here have, a sort of realistic distribution automatically. And in fact, if you want to know what it did as far as the distribution, you can just ask it. So like, give me a breakdown of customers by age group.
And then once you're done with this, we do have a couple questions around relationships and consistency. So
Yeah,
just
sure, fire away.
okay. Does data make sense over profit equals revenue minus cost, for instance? That's one of the questions.
Yes. So most of those things are pretty basic and it'll figure those out like automatically. But if ever you find that like it's not doing that because there's some relationship in your database that's not obvious either by the naming or it's very specific to your product, you can just tell it like, hey, this relationship exists. I notice you're doing it wrong. Please fix it. And you can continue to iterate on the data. So it's not a one-shot thing, and that's very important for success with AI. One-shotting an entire data set, even though we basically like two-shotted it here, is very hard. But the agent works with you to iterate on that data set. So if there's a thing that you don't like, things you want to add, then you can very easily iterate on it. So to get back to what I was saying before, like it will graph distributions for you. You can tell it to adjust that distribution. For example, let's like look at email. Show me email providers. Should probably do something similar. And then we might tell it to adjust, like if we want more corporate users, then just like probably by default, it'll do a bunch of personal emails. Yeah, okay. So that's the breakdown it came up with by default. And we might say something like, I would like, let's say 30% to be from real corporate domains. So it'll just like figure out how to go do that, make the changes, and then you'll have that, new nuance to your distribution.
So another
Just say,
question for you about relationships. How about generating consistent data across multiple platforms? For example, a customer system in Salesforce with an account system in Oracle. So generated data would need to be consistent across those platforms.
yeah, so you could either, it depends on whether you're generating all of those platforms at once or you're just generating one platform to be consistent with an already existing data set. So if you're generating them at once, it's probably best to put them in one logical database within Fabricate so that it can have relational integrity, sort of between the tables, even though they're in different databases in the, actual real world. Or if you're just like generating data to reference some real world system, which is of course very common, you would put the keys, like let's say your accounts are managed in some other system, extract the IDs for the accounts, put them in a file, and then import them here using this button. You can just like drop in a CSV data set or a JSON data set, and then say, like, account IDs should all be pulled from here. Don't make up account IDs, always use that. And so that when you upload a file, it'll become a table in here and it can reference that, and then it can just exclude that table from the output when you actually export data.
That's cool. I hadn't known that one yet. We've got a bunch more questions coming in. I'll ask two of them and I'll let you get back to the demo.
Mhm.
Uh, does Fabricate support generating geospatial realistic distributions like geopoints nearby referenced georegions?
Yeah, it should. So we have a built-in database and generator that helps with this in that it can generate locations and know where individual cities are. And then it could also iterate from that and randomize within that. So, like, literally, just describing what you want will probably get you where you need to be. It's got the tools to be able to do that. Um, and so it's kind of funny as we get tons of questions like these from prospects in the course of, sales calls. And often the sales calls are now just taking the shape of like, you ask a question, I type that in, and then we get, can it do it or not? And so in most cases, I just encourage folks to just try things out because it's far better a tool in their hands than it would be in my hands answering those kind of questions because you're the expert in your own domain. But yeah, geospatial stuff, the AI itself has an awareness of that. Plus, we augment it with some fairly rich databases of locations so that it can iterate on that. But certainly like regionality too. If you ask it, hey, I want all my customers to be in Finland. It can like come up with the addresses, but it can also write everything in Finnish and come up with things that are are at least reasonably culturally relevant for that area. So it's
All
quite
right.
good at internationalization.
I'll let you get back to the demo because like, there's more questions coming in, but we'll try to get to them later.
Okay. All right. Let's look at just some basics like relational integrity. So if I go to orders here, all the orders point back to customers. The distribution here in terms of how many orders per customer was based on what I asked it, which is 1 to 5 in the beginning. For things like products, I asked it electronic products, so it came up with realistic names and descriptions that match, and prices that seem realistic for those types of items. That's your sort of like basic relational database. Fabricate is great at that use case. And then when it comes time to export data, you click here and you can either download it in any of these formats or you can push it like directly to a database if you're able to actually connect to your database. So the general workflow is, you have a schema, you have some information about how to generate data, you log into Fabricate, you chat with the agent, you work with it to refine this sort of data set, and that sort of becomes your canonical data for your demo or for testing environments. And then you export that, either by clicking here, you push it to a database, or there's also an API where you can then go and pull that data down from Fabricate if you want to integrate it into CI/CD workflows. And then the question often comes up like, okay, what happens like 3 weeks from now when my schema changes? I've got a migration that's adding a column or a table or removing something. You basically can just come back into Fabricate and paste that migration into the chat here, and it'll adjust and ask questions, and it's a sort of long-lived thing. Um, and so the context is around basically permanently. You can also start new chats if you want to divide and conquer problems and then hop back to an old chat. All the chats are stored here in the chat history. You can feel free to continue those chats on forever and it'll have all the context. You can also, if you want to do something that's like fairly radical, you can just like clone the database and it'll clone all the chat history as well. So it'll have the context. You're free to experiment there. And if you like break stuff, you can just delete it and get rid of it. But just like with Cursor, you can also iterate without fear as you're working in a single chat. So you'll notice any of the messages that you have here, like where was my most recent change? Yeah, here. So if I wanted to roll back, I go here, let's look at, see we've got like Salesforce and Intel and Comcast. If I wanted to roll back to this point and not have 30% be from real corporate domains, I just click there, it deletes that message, it rolls back the database to that point in time, and it puts the message text down here so I could edit it if I want to. So that makes it really easy to use AI fearlessly. Like it could absolutely do something that you don't expect and change data in a way that you don't want, but the penalty for that is very small because you can just click roll back and it's an instant rollback to where you were before. That's the sort of basics of working with structured data in Fabricate. But I want to point out that it's also a really good document generator and unstructured data generator as well. So for example, I might say I would like to have reviews in a table with ID, product ID, customer ID, let's say stars, 1 to 5, um, and content. Generate 10 reviews for products that customers bought. So you might already have a reviews table, in which case it probably would have been in your initial schema, but you can also create things on the fly as you're experimenting as well. So it's going to go and create that table, and now it's going to figure out how to actually go write the reviews.
While it does that, I'll jump in with another question. Can you generate intentionally wrong data in Fabricate for validator test, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can just tell it the wrongness that you want, and it will go and put that outlier or nuance in the data per your spec. So by default, it's going to try to create like fairly clean data, but you can absolutely tell it there's a certain percentage of the time I want like ages that are over 100 or something like that. Or I want some percentage of the time there to be like typos in things.
Mm.
Um, and so here, let's see, if we go to reviews, now, it wrote reviews that are actually based on the actual products, as sort of bespoke text. And as you like ask for more things, it'll do them more concurrently, and it can rip through a data set like quite fast, much faster than like a single LLM thread would for writing, reviews in mass. So it can generate these kind of large text based on the context in the table, based on the structured data. Um, and then it can also do things like um, I want, let's say, like I want receipts for payments. Um, so I want, let's say, receipts in PDF format for the first, let's say, and I'll just make it small, 10 payments. Um, let's just see if it'll go do that.
Along the line of document type data, we have a question. Can it generate synthetic documents with hierarchical structure? Something around, do I imagine it being able to generate tabular extracted version of this data with the same level of complexity?
Well, let's see this. I think this is basically going to be sort of what you're asking. So let's see as it iterates on it. But basically, like the documents will actually have the structure of the data here. Like, so you should see, the line items and the receipts as it goes down. Now it's like, let's see, it's actually iterating on this, and you'll see the agent like, uh, you know, basically like sometimes it won't be able to figure out exactly how to do things on the first take. It'll see the errors and it'll iterate on it, and so it should, eventually spit out basically what we need. You just need to wait as it does it. So it came up finally with the way to do that. And if I go here to PDFs, I can look at, let's see. So here, it's got the information from the actual order of the customer, and then it's got the actual products they paid for in a table there, a breakdown of the payments, things about the credit card number, all that sort of stuff in there as well. So I don't know if that answers the question that you were asking there, but it's like the documents that it generates are normally highly informed by the structured data that it generated or the unstructured free text that it generated as well. So you can kind of imagine in a real transactional database, these documents might be stored in attachments somewhere on S3 or something that link back to records in your database. You have that sort of relationship here because the documents are being generated from the structured data, and they'll line up with that structured data when you generate them.
We have a question around making revision, editing and iterating on the data that's been generated.
Mhm.
How does Fabricate handle editing schema when new dependencies are added that may conflict with existing generated synthetic data, especially at scale? Is there an efficient way that Fabricate can do this?
Um, you would just give it the migrations, and it should essentially obey what that migration is telling it to do. It would doesn't even matter what format that's in. Like it could be a Ruby on Rails migration, or it could be a Prisma migration, or like actual SQL file. It's going to interpret that and try to sort of replay that in spirit in the data that's here. So it might ask questions about how to handle certain things, but also your migration probably explicitly calls out how to handle any potential conflicts. And so it should just learn from that. It's a thing that you have to try in your particular case. But the idea is that it has all the data that's already generated. It has all the context from the chat and everything you've told it. You give it a migration, and so it's quite well informed, for making adjustments. And it's not regenerating everything from scratch. It's changing data sort of in place. And so it doesn't necessarily need to go and rebuild everything. It is just changing what needs to be changed.
And that speaks to a question we got earlier, but I was kind of saving because it's speaking more about what's going on in the back end. Are you generating a huge config file with the LLM and then generate the data with the help of the LLM, or is the LLM writing custom SQL code or something similar for each data set?
Yeah, it's writing custom code, and you see all that code in here. Like here's the JavaScript code that it used to generate some of the data for the receipts. And so, um, all that stuff is stored within Fabricate, but its general approach, and it's necessary in order to be able to scale to do this, is not to use like individual LLM tokens to output record by record, but to write code that makes efficient use of LLM tokens to generate data. And so you'll see it do things like, all right, let's say you wanted, Finnish names. It'll come up with a fairly large array of like Finnish first names, Finnish last names, and then it will write code that uses combinations of those to generate the actual data. So that's how you can scale up to like, I want 1 million users. Okay, come up with a reasonable sample size of common names and then randomize those across 1 million users rather than trying to use, output tokens to generate every single user.
Yeah. Lots more questions. Do you want me to ask them now, or do you want me to let you get
Um,
back?
I want to show one more thing
Yeah.
before we just dive entirely into questions. That's so everything I've showed you is maybe like 80% of what's out there now that you can use in production if you sign up for Fabricate. But there's a new thing that we're working on that I'm like extremely excited about. And so I'd love to get people's feedback and just the chance to show it off. So you'll see everything I did was on Fabricate.Tonic.ai that's in production. Now I'm going to switch over to localhost. So this is yet to land. And so, forgive me if things go wrong, if the demo gods are angry, but I'm going to try some cool stuff. So let's do API webinar demo. And what I'm going to do is I've got, if I can find it here, let's get rid of that. I've got a API with an open API spec for creating accounts and users, like maybe something similar that you might see in Stripe. So let me show you what's in that. That's here. There's endpoints for like creating an account, for creating users, um, and there might be some things for like listing users, and this describes the response format. But basically, like imagine that you needed to set up a Stripe sandbox and you wanted to generate, um, like 1,000 users spread across 100 accounts, or pick a number. And so with Fabricate, obviously, you can give it Stripe's API contract. In fact, it probably even knows quite a lot about it because Stripe's so popular. And it can go and generate the data that you would use for that API. But like, wouldn't it be nice if you could also push the data directly into the API via Fabricate as well? So I can take something like this, and let's go back here, and I'll do the same sort of workflow as before. I'll just drop this in, and I'll say generate data for this API. And it'll analyze it and probably ask me some questions, and I'll punt on most of them.
I have to say, I love punting on the questions, just being like, you figure it out. And then it figures it out beautifully. And it's like, okay.
Well, we're going to make it easier to not punt in the future. Actually, Yulia is working on an enhancement where it's going to render a form with like choices in here. So you can
Oh,
be a
cool.
lot more efficient in your answering. Um,
Very cool.
so let's see. Let's say I want like 10 accounts with about 10 users per account. Everything else is up to you. Okay, while that's generating, let me just fire up one thing here. Mhm. Start. Okay, I'll show you what I'm doing in a second. Okay, so it's now going and populating the accounts, and then it's got to do the users.
While we're doing that, I'll ask one question that
Mhm.
feels easy. Can it populate Salesforce.com, Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, or SAP S4 HANA?
Yeah, I can really like handle any data model. Like you might have to give it the contract for that data model or the schema, but there's nothing like domain specific built into Fabricate. There's a lot of general things built into it and the power of AI and tools to be able to generate data. So like literally any schema you can generate data for. And then you can see here the formats that we support in terms of exporting. Some of them are very specific, like certain SQL formats, Parquet files, et cetera, MongoDB, um, Databricks. But then there's also generic things like JSON lines and CSV that work for a lot of API platforms as well, or just generic CI/CD workflows. So, okay, we've got this data that looks a lot like the API contract in terms of accounts and users. So let's say that um, I want to be able to push all accounts and users to my API, build a workflow to send them to localhost 4000. Um, because I have a mock server running that I'm going to show you. But this would be like api.stripe.com or your own internal API. So this is a new feature called workflows, which basically you chat with the agent and it can build deterministic, reusable workflows that you can interact with either via the UI or via the API. And so the possibilities are sort of endless there in that you can do things like pushing your data to APIs, pushing your data to databases, extracting like subsets of data based on a certain criteria, generating new data with some like minimal variables, doing like validations and checking the data, after you've generated new data to make sure that it meets certain business rules. Like the sky is really the limit there. And so let's say I want HTTP localhost 4000. And what I'm going to do is I'll show the server here. So I basically have this mock server that simulates that API and can receive whatever data we send it. And so, did I give it the right solution error sending request for URL? Oh, because it's not 4000, it's 4001. My other example is on 4000. So let's see. There we go. Okay. So it went and pushed all of that data systematically to the API. So like it created the accounts and then it also linked the users to those accounts. So it's like it understood that linkage and how to do those like back-to-back API calls. And basically what it's doing is it's writing a little program that it's stored within Fabricate. It knows that that program has certain variables. It publishes those as a form. You log in, you click the workflow, you fill out the form, you click run, and it does the thing that you wanted it to do. And so you can imagine certain users like being really deep into Fabricate. They can use Fabricate to generate really complex data. They interact with the agent a lot. They come up with this like golden data set. And then you want to be able to use that thing to stand up new environments, to test APIs, to do all sorts of simple, repeatable things that you do on a daily basis. And you want lots of users to be able to do that, not just the one who's sort of like the expert in generating the data. So those users can be given logins to Fabricate. They drop in here, they select the workflow, they fill out the form, they click the button, and then it goes and does that thing. And it does it repeatedly every time. There's no AI in the loop as it's doing this. It's literally just running the code that it wrote. And so you can iterate with the agent on that functionality as well. Um, but it's creating this sort of deterministic workflow around the data that you've generated within Fabricate. And it can do some like quite amazing things. So we have a whole like secret store internally. So obviously, if you have like API keys or something that you need to authenticate to Fabricate, we have a secure way of storing that at the workspace level and then referencing those in the code in a way that the JavaScript and the agent never actually see your secrets. There's no way for them to expose it. We also allow you to whitelist domains so it can make calls out to domains that you own, or you can request us to whitelist like certain common public things like maybe Stripe or SaaS products. It'll have access to like in air quotes a file system, so it can construct files of an ad hoc nature and then hand them to you in a download. Um, it can do like very powerful things, and so we hope this is a way to make Fabricate useful in day-to-day life as part of your like test data management process, development process, spinning up new environments, etc. So that's probably 2, 3 weeks away behind a feature flag, and then we'll start turning it on as customers need it, and maybe a month or two away from being just general GA.
It's just incredible the flexibility of this new product and not only this workflows feature, but just the data agent itself. Like the use cases just continuously expand. Really cool. We've got a bunch of questions that are really covering a wide range of topics because of the flexibility of the product. I'm gonna hop into some questions that came in the chat. A simple one: does Fabricate support XLSX Excel sheets?
It doesn't actually right now. Like you can download it in CSV, and then that's easy to open in Excel, but it doesn't actually write to Excel at the moment. I don't know why we didn't add that actually. It's like it's pretty easy to add. We'll probably just go do that. But you can always download a CSV
Yeah,
and then open in Excel. It
because
does
it
actually
currently
support
supports
PowerPoint
docx.
though, oddly
Yeah,
enough. So
yeah.
like you can ask it to export Word documents, emails, PowerPoints. Just Excel, I guess, is so adjacent to CSV. We figured probably leave that to later.
Okay. How about can it analyze PDFs, for example, receipts, and create a SQL schema?
Yeah, it can. So if I have a good one handy, but like I've done this a bunch of times, you can literally just take like a PDF form and say, I want more of these. Like I have one example invoice, figure out what data is in there, generate more data like that, and then spit out more documents as I already showed you for receipts. So yeah, it can analyze Word documents, PDFs, images, any text file, of course. Um, and like it'll do the OCR on the fly to figure out the fields in there, and then it uses all the intelligence that I showed you to generate more data of that kind, and then spit out documents that are similar.
You mentioned images, so I'm going to jump to this question. Will it be possible to generate images of the listed products that you had generated in the previous, yeah, as a blob or somehow as an external link?
That is actually kind of a common question. So we may wind up doing that in shorter order than I thought. It doesn't do it right now. No, the AI is sort of limited to text, and it can do large creative text or it can do small structured text as we've seen, but not generating images yet. There is a built-in image generator that's really actually just like picking from random safe for work images of nature and stuff. So if you need placeholders that are real images, it can go and do that and drop those in as binary data in your database. But it will not generate like images based on a description yet. The thing to solve with that is probably the speed and the cost because those things are not super fast yet on most AIs. Of course, we can parallelize them the way that we've done with text, and I'm sure the speed will increase rapidly as the years wear on, but it's not a thing that it does right now.
Okay. And I got some more context around the Excel sheet request that it's more preferred for data science analysts doing research. So that was the
Got it.
origin of that request. All right, one more logistic type question, and then I'll get back to the more technical questions. Can Fabricate be self-hosted? Is it cloud-based? How does that work?
Yeah, so Fabricate right now is 100% cloud-based. And we think that's the right solution for us to be able to iterate on this amazing functionality and solve problems quickly for our customers. So it's all fabricate.tonic.ai.
Cool. All right, question for you here. What's the benefit of using JavaScript for the code generation instead of Python, for instance?
Uh, there's a practical benefit for us as a team that our particular skill set is in sandboxing high performance JavaScript. So my coworker and I, Yvonne, came from a CDN where we actually built edge compute based on JavaScript. So we are quite good at doing that in a way that hopefully cannot be hacked. And can also operate at like tremendous scale. So that's what we've gone with. Python does give more built-in sort of data science tools, but I think the performance and the scalability probably wouldn't have been as good. We might look at that at some point, but I think JavaScript is basically number two in AI nowadays, and it's a pretty close number two. Vercel's behind it. All the examples for all the major AI providers are there, and a lot of the Python libraries are really just wrappers around C libraries anyway that you can have in JavaScript. So where the user's not writing the code, actually the language isn't super important. It's more like the community and the ability to sandbox it and run it at scale securely.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Andrew, our CTO, is also a JavaScript fan, if I'm remembering correctly. Another question along similar lines. I would be curious what agentic framework you recommend right now in time. What agentic framework did you use building Fabricate? Asking because this is one of the more powerful agenting use cases I saw so far.
Yeah. Okay. So Fabricate, the web app and a lot of the code is Ruby on Rails. And so unfortunately, Ruby doesn't actually have a first party agent toolkit for any of the major providers. So I sort of had to reverse engineer the TypeScript toolkit for Anthropic. And so I'm not actually really using a framework per se. I'm basically just using the client library, the first party client library for Anthropic, and wrote a lot of the code that makes it an agent myself. Um, the key, I think, is really picking the model. And there's a lot of different opinions online about this model's the greatest thing ever, and how could you possibly be using that model? And like I see every day that like Anthropic is dead and Codex is the greatest thing, or OpenAI is dead and Gemini is the greatest thing. And I wonder if these people are real because we use all the different models for all sorts of different purposes. And the one for agents that I feel is far and away the best at like making decisions, at recovering from things, at writing code that doesn't fail on the first try is Claude Sonnet 4. So if you had to pick one, that's what I would suggest at this particular point in time. That said, like we probably will wind up like most tools supporting multiple LLMs because you see in daily life like certain LLMs are good at certain domains and others are good at other domains. And sometimes you even switch between LLMs in the course of a single conversation depending on what you need. It's almost like LLMs are like employees. Like you know that some people are the go-to person for certain things and other people are the go-to person for certain other things. And so learning that personality and being able to switch between them is sort of important. But right now, if I'd say if you had to pick one, go with Anthropic and the combination of Sonnet for most things with thinking turned on and Haiku for simple, fast things like generating large blobs of text for conversations and emails and things.
That actually leads to another question that I have. What options do users have in terms of the LLM used by Fabricate? Can they bring their own LLM?
You can bring your own API key for Claude. And so if you're concerned about AI having access to anything that you give it, whether it's schemas, your own requirements, then you do have the option of using Amazon Bedrock in your own AWS account, generating an API key, and then putting that in Fabricate, and then Fabricate will only call your Bedrock whenever anyone from your account logs in and interacts with the agent. So Bedrock gives you guarantees that they're not training based on your data, and it's basically within a sort of virtual sandbox that you own through AWS. I did also hear, I think just yesterday, Microsoft announced that they will support Claude as well. That may already be live. So we'll probably wind up adding support for bringing your own Azure key too. And that gives good options for large enterprises that are worried about training on their information because
Yeah.
most large enterprises are using one of the two.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions specific to the academic space. The first
Mhm.
is there's a bit of a context first before the question. I'm a university professor, and it is very common that companies don't share information, data about operations with students. When students work on their final projects, developing proposals to demonstrate their competencies in the subject, this lack of data becomes a significant challenge. Is it possible to develop a function or tool that can generate realistic, coherent information aligned with a specific business model?
I feel like there's probably more to your question than I fully understand. But if you've got a description of that business model, you can essentially riff with Fabricate to refine its understanding of what you want to do over the course of, questions and answers, and then unleash it on generating data for that model. So it can be quite conversational. In fact, many of our prospects and most of our salespeople will start not with a schema because they don't know the customer's schema. They just like literally start with a description of the customer, and then Fabricate will help come up with a data model that's representative of that customer. So the same could be said for any domain or use case, that you don't necessarily have to bring a schema to it. It can iterate with you as the user to come up with a data model that sort of matches your purpose.
Yeah. And the second question was, do you offer any products that are suitable for educational purposes? And I'd say, Fabricate is very suitable for this type of use case, given the free tier that can really allow you to do a lot on a monthly basis. And I think it would probably meet the needs of those students. And we also have customers of our other products that are in the edtech space. So certainly data used in edtech, used by academic institutions, is relevant. Is served by our products.
Yeah, Fabricate's quite popular amongst students. The free tier is generally enough to get in and get out for that month's project. And then, the monthly pricing also makes it fairly attractive that if you're going to need it for a particular semester, it's less than the cost of a book to use it for that semester and then to, be done with it. And so, yeah, like there's every day there's students that sign up, you see with .edu addresses that are using it for their projects.
Yeah. All right, a couple more questions for you here. Can you stand up mock or temporary databases of different flavors that hold the mock data that we can use SQL drivers to connect to and interact with?
Ah, there isn't like, JDBC or SQL level support for accessing the databases. Um, there, there will be either through workflows or through a separate line of work that's coming out soon, the ability to like put an API in front of your data to mock any given sort of REST API. But that's obviously not a SQL driver thing. So now there isn't that ability. Probably the better thing to do is to build some sort of CI/CD orchestration that pulls the data down and puts it in a sort of ephemeral database. Or you can also download the data as SQLite as well. So if what you're looking for is, hey, I actually want like a functional database, but I don't care particularly about the platform, SQLite's great for that. But no, there isn't at this point the ability to just connect with like, a JDBC driver or an ODBC driver to the database as a running thing.
We have another question for you around how you build and work and develop on Fabricate. Do you also test open source LLMs, or did you
Yeah,
ever?
we have. Haven't had great luck with most of them. The one that I feel gets the furthest is GPT OSS. I forget the number, but whatever the largest GPT OSS is. Um, the open source LLMs are quite good for what LLMs in general were good at like 2 years ago, I feel, and that they can do, the generation of realistic text. I don't think their like decision making and thinking is anywhere near up to par for what I would want to include in a product like this for an agentic workflow. Like, in fact, I don't even think GPT-5 is particularly great at that. It's very slow and it not particularly great at writing code that works on the first try, or even sort of keeping its focus across many turns of a long running task. So we do occasionally get customers that come to us that want to like self-host LLMs. The The thing that would get you furthest is probably GPT-OSS running behind something like VLLM that gives you the OpenAI contract. But they're not really ready for prime time in these workflows, I feel yet.
We're already getting some thanks in the chat, and we are coming up on the end of the hour. So if you have any last minute questions, submit them now. If not, I'm going to go with my last question, which is just really, I mean, you've talked about workflows. We've got some ideas of what's on the roadmap. What are you excited about most for Fabricate next?
Yeah, I I am really excited about this workflows feature because I feel it will allow us to open doors that we don't even know are there right now. Um, and for Fabricate to be this like incredibly convenient and helpful part of the workflows of like both developers, testers, um, solutions architects, and my hope is that they'll reach for it for a bunch of problems that we didn't even intend because it's so easy to just sort of vibe code a thing and then have that be a reusable sort of application that is attached to this incredibly rich data generator. And so it can become like a really helpful part of your daily life. So that's a major thing that we're investing in now. And then um, we are working on some enhancements to the underlying JavaScript sandbox that are like truly amazing that will basically allow it to go down and like download and securely run community libraries on the fly for whatever is needed. So like if you need to write a workflow that packages data up in some way that's not common, but there's a library out there that helps you do it. It can go and discover that, download it, run it, incorporate that into the workflow, and ship it like in a few seconds. Same as like, connecting to some API. If there's a good client for it, it doesn't need to reverse engineer all the code and bang its head on that. It can just use community libraries. So the how we actually do that is like I'm blown away. I didn't actually do it. Yvonne, who works with me, is like my partner on the back end, is about ready to ship it. So I'm super excited for that. Basically, like I feel like we've got this amazing engine for generating all types of data, and now it's making it have the most utility possible in the most amount of workflows and making it just the most convenient thing to use.
Nice. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Really appreciate all the questions. I don't think we've ever gotten that many questions on a webinar. To start generating data with a Fabricate Data Agent, you can sign up for free at fabricate.tonic.ai. Also, be sure to head on over to Product Hunt today. We launched Fabricate Data Agent on Product Hunt, so you can give us an upvote there. You can also find more information in our product docs, of course, or connect with our team at fabricate@tonic.ai and on our Discord, where Mark is available to answer more of your questions. Thank you all again, and we look forward to hearing more about what you build with Fabricate.
Awesome. Thank you all. See you later.
Thanks.